With Season 0 coming to an end and hero patch notes around the corner, here is one buff for every hero in Marvel Rivals. So yeah, no matter how strong the character is, they're getting a buff in this video. And keep in mind, each buff is supposed to make the character more fun, as I'm trying to keep NetEast's design philosophy in mind, letting the characters do what they do most fun, and reducing any jank. Speaking of jank, let's talk about Captain America. Because as a freedom fighting main myself, I could just say take off the delay on his shield, or give him a stun on his dash. But honestly, I can work around that. What I would love most playing Captain America, considering that he's already weak as a tank, give him an extra shield throw. The most fun thing about Captain America's kit is being able to throw your shield, ricochet it off walls, and hit multiple enemies. Considering that Doctor Strange doesn't have a delay on his shield, and Penny can stun every 3 seconds, I don't see how either one of these options can't be implemented with Cap. Next up, Doctor Strange. One of, if not the best tank in the game, but a nice quality of life change would be to reduce the cooldown, or in fact remove the cooldown from canceling his portal. Next up, the Hulk. I know some people would really want Hulk's ult to one-tap squishies, characters with 250 health. After all, he is the strongest Avenger. And if not that, at least make it so that enemies can't be healed when they are grabbed. But I ultimately settled on his Hulk shield, increasing the range and being able to push back enemies. This gives him and his team a little bit of a breather. For Magneto, one of the comments said, allow him to do extra damage to enemy gadgets like Penny Mines and Punisher's turret. Interesting idea for the master of magnetism. But one buff can definitely help my boy Zodic out, allowing his bubbles to have independent cooldowns, or just give him 2 charges. That way the Magneto has to choose whether to give the shield to his teammates or keep him for himself. A fun buff for a character that can make him your team savior or the biggest enemy. My buff idea for Thor is to allow him to drop his hammer pause anywhere he so chooses, similar to Winter Soldier's ult, giving him more versatility with his ultimate, cause right now he can only really use it when he's on top of the enemy, or perhaps just increase the movement speed in the ultimate. For Venom, I was thinking increase the slow on his snare, and also allow the snare to do damage on impact. Right now it only does about like 5 damage on impact, and then after 3 seconds it does the big impact damage. I say just let the big impact damage happen a second after the snare has already occurred, and then have the slow doubled from 15% to 30. Yeah, I know, pretty big. But right now, the snare doesn't even feel like it's really slowing down enemies, not providing any resistance for some of the mobile characters in this game. My buff idea for Groot, as it stands already, he's a pretty solid character all around, with increased health and damage with his walls, but I want to touch on his bomb. Right now it only does increased damage, but I want to add a little bit more synergy with it. With my proposed buff, his bomb can go off, but the little saplings can go into the ground and grow into little spores. These spores can be picked up by Groot and they can heal him. Maybe about 10 to 15 per spore. Actually, no, about 5 to 10 per spore, as it gives him like 5 or 6. And for the last tank, Penny, I say to increase her Cyber Bond attachment distance. Every time I played Penny, I was wondering what the sweeping attack did because it never hit any of the enemies, and it turns out it only hits the enemies that are literally right in front of Penny and not the enemies that you're aiming at. So a simple change right there to give Penny more control while in her ultimate. For a character with a solid kit, that's all I could come up with. Now on to the Duelist, starting with Namor. Something I found apparently annoying with Namor was the fact that his turrets would go away often quickly, and almost especially after hitting my Wrath of 7 Seas. And the only reason to hit that attack is so that way your squids do increase damage. And so I thought, why not mesh the 2 of these abilities together, creating a little bit less of a bottleneck. And so after hitting the Wrath of 7 Seas, the squid turrets that are on the map get an extended duration of about 3 to 5 seconds, allowing the turrets to actually do the increased damage whether or not they're almost to their expiration. And at the same time, for every hit while the turrets are in this enraged state, it reduces the cooldown of the Wrath of 7 Seas, intertwining both the ability with the turrets, giving the player more of a reward after hitting their attack. For the sharpshooting Hawkeye, make it so his exploding arrows, the longer you hold, will determine how wide the spread is. That way, for any quick triggers, you can go farther but at a more condensed angle, and a longer hold would allow you to hit that same distance but at a wider spread, allowing him to control any off angles and choke points in a game. For the Goddess of Wind, oh boy, I think she needs a whole lot more than just a buff. But let's start with giving her the ability to headshot enemies. After all, she does have ammo, unlike Penny, and she has to aim, unlike Scarlet Witch, so reward her. Or at the very least, take off the fall damage. For the Punisher, when in this team up with Rocket, he should get infinite ammo while also in his turret. I can't even tell you how dumb I felt going into Punisher's turret while having the infinite ammo and thought I could just shoot infinitely. Please just make that a thing so I don't look stupid ever again. Scarlet Witch, make her dark shield able to be attached to enemies. They can still be placed on the ground, walls, and mid-air, but make so if the enemy is directly hit with dark steel, it is attached to them. Perhaps the radius is gone or it still stays. Either way, the enemy still gets that periodic stun. But perhaps the enemy can reduce the duration of the ability when it's attached to them if they continue to move. For Black Panther, I saw a really funny buff. Give him silent and muffled footsteps. Shout out to old buddy for giving this comment. Thematically, it would be awesome and even funnier seeing pros and streamers rage at it. For Black Widow, make the effects of her ultimate larger and more condensed, and add a damage over time effect as well, making it better for crowd control. For Hela, wait, hold on. I actually don't have anything for Hela. Okay, no joke, I'm actually being serious right now. I actually don't have a buff idea for both Hela and Winter Soldier. For some reason, I legitimately just couldn't think of one. And even though Armed and Dangerous said Hela needs a fire rate buff, I think for Hela's Soul Drainer ability, it should increase its radius and pull strength whilst also knocking down flying enemies. And for Winter Soldier, increase the time needed for his culling effect on his ultimate. So instead of having to kill the enemy in 5 seconds to regain your ultimate, make it 7. So yeah, just make the rich keep getting richer. Okay, instead of talking about the really strong characters, let's talk about Magic. My buff idea for her was initially to give her a little bit of a shield or health increase when activating her ultimate, as instinctively it's a little odd that she doesn't get a little bit of a health increase when activating such an ultimate. But one buff that would immensely help any Magic main would be to increase the hitbox on her dash. It's a move that doesn't have the most favorable hitbox, especially when you compare it to another duelist that has a launching up ability like Spider-Man, where he can hit you with an uppercut without even looking. Speaking of the spectacular, one buff for Spider-Man would be to add an indicator on non-stuck enemies. This indicator will light up to let the player know that the enemy is within hooking range. This might seem minuscule, but it would help a lot. Considering how punishing it can be trying to hook an enemy that isn't stuck, this slight change can affect how Spider-Man mains engage in a fight on the fly. For Iron Fist, turn off his auto locking when in his ultimate. Whoa, okay, I know this sounds like a nerf and I promise it's not. One of the best parts about Iron Fist ultimate is that it has increased range. So my buff idea is allowing him to do piercing or splash damage with this attack, making him a bigger threat than just single targets. One buff would be to make Iron Man fly faster. I know, sounds crazy, make the guy that's 30 meters in the air much harder to hit. But honestly, I don't care. Playing as Iron Man, I want to fly around the map and I want to zoom. Right now, even with all the freedom in the air, I still move at the same speed as Magneto. So yeah, maybe increase that flight speed by 25% and even double that when he boosts. For Psylocke, I initially thought that she should have an increased duration on her invis, or honestly just remove it entirely, and have the speed buff be based off stamina. For Moon Knight, an interesting buff that would allow him to engage in close quarter situations would be to add a stomping ability while he's gliding mid-air. Activating the stomp will instantly stop him from gliding and drop him straight down, pouncing on any enemies. For Star-Lord, this seems like a simple change but reduces fuel consumption cost, because in-game you can use the smallest amount of fuel and it would say you used a whole chunk. So when it's completely depleted, there's a little bit of a cooldown. I think they should fix it so it's solely based off the fuel gauge. For Wolverine, it's simple. Everyone's been begging for it, so I just gotta say it. Give him a bigger hitbox for his leap. And I'll be more specific. It's not really the width of the attack that's really punishing players, it's more so the height. Being really close on the enemy and still not being able to have that leap feels like a big f you from the game for even trying to do that. But if that's out the question, allow him to mantle short walls with his claws. Squirrel Girl, no joke, I think Squirrel Girl has the worst ult in the game. It literally does nothing and can be stopped with a hop. So my proposed buff, the ult should slow/stun enemies, but most importantly, if hit by it, pushing them back, as in its current state right now, it's just not punishing enough. And finally, the backbone of the team, the supports. For Luna Snow, the most fun thing about Luna Snow is being able to skate around the map. And currently the only way Luna can really heal herself is if she used other abilities. So a really fun buff idea I had was to allow her to keep skating while healing an enemy. Not the full 9.6 movement speed, but maybe something like 7.5. And as a bonus, she gets passive healing while on her ice. an extra touch up to make this hero feel even smoother to play. For Adam Warlock, the biggest problem for Adam Warlock compared to the other supports is the fact he has the least amount of movement. Like, there's literally no movement in any part of his kit. So for his ultimate, I was thinking that upon activation, he goes all the way in the air and then zooming all the way down to his desired location, activating his ultimate. That way, if he's in the middle of a firefight, he can reposition before even having to die and re-cocoon. Or if he's trailing, this allows him to zoom into the battlefield and save everyone, like a savior. Anyway, for the trickster himself, Loki. Honestly, as a Loki main, I feel he's perfect. But honestly, there's not enough trickery going on. Enemies see your clones, whether you are the clone or you aren't, they're shooting at it. But the most fun thing about Loki is being able to teleport to your clones. Having to save it only when you need to bail out or reposition is no fun. I want to cause some chaos in the middle of a firefight. And so for the only fitting buff for the God of Mischief is to reduce his cooldown on his Devious Exchange from 15 to 12 seconds, matching the cooldown for his doppelganger ability. For Rocket, I want to be able to boost backwards. At least for me, it's hard when I get attacked by a DPS, so I have to just zoom up into the air and hope for the best. But I'm sure every Rocket main already knows this. So for my proposed buff, allow Rocket to be able to attack and heal at the same time, holding right trigger or left click to attack and the right click or left trigger for the heals. Now the caveat with this is that you wouldn't have the same healing output if you had just held right click or left trigger, as that would just naturally be faster. But this buff allows Rocket to contribute to the total team damage while still contributing as a healer. For Mantis, should I even give a buff for Mantis considering the fact that she gets banned in every single diamond lobby I've ever seen? Imagine maining a character all the way up until diamond and then you're not able to play them for the rest of your rank up journey. But one buff for Mantis would be to reduce the arc on her sleep. I don't even play Mantis, but it's kind of surprising how much of an arc there is on her sleep. Now I see why Mantis mains only use this defensively and at close range. Well, at least with this buff, it gives them the option to use it offensively. And honestly, I hope she uses it offensively. For Cloak and Dagger, well, honestly, just cloak really. Make it so his dark teleportation is unable to be cancelled by teammates for at the very least 0.5 or 1 second, as its duration is 2 seconds. And why would I say this? Well, if you've ever played Cloak and Dagger and you tried to use Cloak Shroud to protect your teammates from the enemy ultimate and they kept shooting, either because you're playing with randoms with no mic, or they didn't realize that they were cloaked because of the fast cast time. Believe it or not, the hardest character to think of a buff for this video was Jeff. One buff I have for Jeff the Lang Shark is allowing for his ultimate to be directed. Something that really annoys me is whenever Jeff is on the objective and he swallows him and his teammates as well as the enemies, and when throwing his teammates, he throws them off the objective even though he's aiming downwards. Make it so that way Jeff throws them towards the direction of his crosshair. Well, those are all the buffs I have for this video. If you want to be featured in the next video, one nerf for every hero, make sure to subscribe and comment in my community post, or just leave your comment down below. Make sure to follow us over on Twitch. We'll be streaming at 1,000 followers, but we're live on YouTube every weekend, so subscribe, and as always, be mighty.